Okay? All right. Write this down. Everything is biblical. Everything is biblical. Now, anybody have any idea what I mean by that? Some of you have heard me say this before. What do I mean by that? Everything is biblical.
Even sin is talked about in Scripture.
Okay. All right. Yeah. At a kind of the broadest level, okay, that's what I'm talking about, but it's a little deeper than that. Everything is biblical. Okay, that's part of it. Yeah, the world is created good. We've tainted it, so we live in a fallen world. It's absolutely crucial. If you're going to function as a Christian in this world and not go nuts, you have to understand that there are certain basic things that has to guide all of your thought and your interpretation of the world around you, including your interpretation of yourself, including your interpretation of your best friend or the person you marry or your kids, right? Christians who mess up with their kids, oftentimes it's because they're paying lip service to what the Bible says about humanity, but they don't really want to believe it. I'm so disappointed in you. Why? They got their sinful nature from you. How can you be disappointed in your kid? They're simply reflecting your image in the same way you are reflecting a depraved version of the image of God. You should never be disappointed in your children. You should actually never be shocked. I think one of the greatest Christian virtues you can develop in a sign of maturity, and I've been working on it for a long time, is to be unoffendable. So no matter what you do to me, I'm not going to take offense. I mean, that's what Jesus does, right? He does not take offense. And if ever there was anyone who could take offense, it was him. Instead, he took the offense on his back and carried it for us, right? That's being Christ-like, okay? So when I say everything is biblical, what I mean is this, okay? If you read the Bible and you actually take it seriously, like you actually really believe that it is an accurate description of God, His creation, the fall, and man, then one of the central things that should come through and stick with you is that man really is totally depraved. I'm not getting that from Calvin. I'm getting it from the same place Calvin got it, which is the Bible, right? That's why I said Romans 1 is so important. Human beings are absolutely foul, disgusting, wretched, miserable. We can primp ourselves up, but we are garbage. That is our nature after the fall. Okay? So on the one hand, I think it's rather silly for Christians to make a big deal of, oh, I was so offended by that. It's God's job to be offended. It's our job to say that's sinful, or it is going to subject you to temptation, or God hates it. But who are we to be offended? It's just as nasty as we are because people just like us produced it. Okay? So when I say everything is biblical, that's one thing. Another is that everything is biblical because if you look at art, let's talk about movies because we're kind of on that subject. If you look at movies, what else could you expect? How does a movie work, right? I mean, according to Aristotle, any narrative story has to have a plot. And the plot has to consist of a minimum of 3 parts. What are the 3 parts? Anybody know? Beginning, middle, and end. You have to have a beginning and a middle and end. In other words, the action develops. Something has to happen. Okay? So a plot is driven by what? What drives a plot? Conflict, okay? When was the last time you laid down your $8 or whatever, went down to the Edwards Cinema, sat down, you see a movie that goes like this. 2 young people meet and fall in love. Everything is perfect and peachy keen. They get married. They get wonderful careers, fine income, live in a nice suburban town, got a couple of cars, a couple of wonderful kids. Everything is fabulous, and they live a wonderful life together. The end. You've never seen a movie like that. You never will see a movie like that. You know why? Because it would never occur to anyone to make a movie like that because no one would go see it because it's boring. Nothing happens. Something has to happen. And the thing that happens will always be some kind of a conflict. It could be good guy, bad guy, white horse, black horse, whatever. Okay? It could be 2 armies. It could be 2 people who fall in love and then have some kind of a conflict. Or it could be, here's a marital situation and one of the spouses cheats on the other with their best friend and the person finds out, and then it becomes a huge conflict. Okay? It could be an internal conflict, one main character in the movie who's struggling with, do I do this or do I do that? Right? It could be any of a number of those things or any combination of those things, but there has to be a conflict. And every conflict presupposes what? In broadest terms? there has to be two or more opposing forces, right? They might be abstract forces, good and evil, you know, the Nazis versus the Allies. Or it could just be two people, good guy, bad guy, or, you know, a couple that are in love but can't get along. Okay? So there's always a presupposition of two or more opposing forces. The basic formula is two forces that oppose, and the basic formulation is good and evil. Now, most movies and most, you know, reasonably sophisticated novels, they kind of nuance that a little bit. It's a little bit more complex like that. And a lot of the most interesting movies are the flawed heroes. You know, Oskar Schindler, who saves, you know, over 1,000 Jews, but he's also a heavy drinker and a womanizer, and he's also making a profit off the Jews even while he's saving them. And he doesn't save enough of them, right? And he realizes at the end of the movie, if I'd have sold my car, that's 10 people. If I sold my ring, this is one person, right? And he's stricken by guilt because he didn't do enough. Great movie, okay? So there has to be, in a narrative, there has to be the plot. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and end. It has to progress. And it's always built around a conflict which presupposes good and evil. Do you understand that Hollywood is working against itself? Right? Because virtually everyone in Hollywood is very liberal and very opposed to any kind of moral absolutes, and what we would call, even though I disagree with the term because it doesn't really exist, but they're what most people call moral relativists. There is no right, there is no wrong, you can do whatever you want. Nonetheless, their art form and their livelihood depends upon conflict of good and evil. Most of them don't even see that their whole system collapses in on itself because they make their money with art that denies what they say is really real. Okay? So what happens is you have this built-in problem in Hollywood movies. One of the examples that I like to use, we talk about this in my film class, is Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, right? Where there's this psychotic murder and he's, you know, insane and he goes around stabbing people in showers and stuff like that. And at the end of the movie, in the last 7 or 8 minutes, when everything is getting solved and resolved and so on and so forth, this character that you've never met before and has nothing to do with the story comes in, he's a psychiatrist, and he explains it all away in terms of Freudian psychopathology. And he removes the whole question of good or evil, and he says, the guy's nuts. And that makes the movie not work. Because what makes the movie terrible is that there's an evil person doing evil things. Right? So there's this built-in problem with Hollywood movies. So what happens is, going back to everything is biblical, when you watch a movie, when you read a novel, when you look at any kind of narrative art, and I think you can extend it to just about any kind of art, everything is biblical because human beings are exactly like God says they are. Right? If you read and believe Romans 1, would you expect anything other than Quentin Tarantino? I mean, what else do you... That's why I said Pollyanna is such a dangerous movie, because it's trying to deny, in a much stronger way than anything Tarantino does, it's trying to deny Romans 1. Okay? So everything is biblical. If you believe that man is totally depraved, see, the center of everything has to be biblical anthropology. You have to, more than anything else, understand, not just believe, but really understand what the Bible means when it says man suppresses the truth and is totally driven by evil. Okay? So when you watch a movie, remember, what else can you expect? The most evil movie ever made is perfectly biblical. It's perfectly biblical. It's exactly what human beings are going to produce. What you have to learn is, how much of this do I expose myself?